Has this ever happened to you? Well, fret not! If you ever find yourself in this situation, just do this! What? You telling me you don't know how to do that? Well, I guess you'll need some sort of movement guide or something. If only there was a comprehensive tutorial on the modern mechanics of the game. Movement in Peaks of Yore is wild, and something that can be really confusing at first. I've been asked a lot to make a movement guide since the last one that was made, well, over 8 months ago. And with how much the movement has changed since then, it's time for a new one. No hate to you, Gringus, your guide was still amazing. With that being said, this tutorial will be for every Peaks player out there. Those that just booted up the game, those that are stuck on Solemn Tempest, and those that could even be stuck doing Avian Chaos on Solemn Tempest. And this is not just a movement guide, it will also teach you how you can get into speedrunning. Because trust me when I say, this game is so fun to speedrun. So now with the mechanics in the best and most consistent state they will ever be in, and the DLC being right around the corner, there couldn't be a better time for the definitive Peaks of Yore speedrunning and movement mechanic guide. So why don't we start where everyone else starts, at the beginning. Welcome to the movement guide tutorial for Peaks of Yore. This will be your all-in-one inclusive guide for everything regarding movement techniques and just, overall mechanics for the game. This will help you not only just get better at the game, it'll help you complete all those achievements that you still want to beat. It'll be really, really good if you want to get into speedrunning. Hopefully this video even inspires you to get into speedrunning, because this game is just, it's super fun to speedrun, and I highly recommend trying it. But after you watch the video first, you can't get good if you don't know what you're doing. So why don't we get started with some settings, actually. I want to talk about a couple settings first. Very first thing that I will bring up is there is a little setting at the bottom here that is called free aim. Here we are at the lighthouse. If I stick both of my hands out like this, you can see how they both stay in the middle of my screen constantly. They're there in the middle of the screen. However, if you turn free aim on, now if I wiggle my hands around, you see how my hands do a bit of wiggling? Yeah, so it's entirely personal preference whether or not you have free aim on or off. However, for learning the movement mechanics, I would say having free aim off is better for beginners and just all around better for learning the movement mechanics. So I recommend turning free aim off. But again, it's entirely up to you. And also keybinds as well. Keybinds is also a pretty important thing to mention, because there is one specific thing about keybinds that is actually really important to note. Most of the keybinds can mostly just be whatever you want them to be, but there's one thing I will tell you to do. If you go here, your forward is W, and also you should bind your run/sprint to W as well, because there's no stamina in this game at all or anything. So anytime you're on solid ground, there's no reason to not ever be running. So binding run and walk to the same button is actually a really good idea. The one last thing that I will mention is if we go into graphics, your field of view is a lot more important than you think it is. I don't recommend having a low FOV. Anywhere from say 90 to 100, I say is a good FOV for this game. Trust me, it'll allow you to see just so much more. Other than that, yeah, let's move on with your arms. We have arms in this game. If you boot up the video game, you will be greeted on the very first peak with nothing but you and your arms. And your arms are a valuable tool. Your arms allow you to grab holds. And when you're on holds, you want to climb upwards. That's how everyone starts. But what if I told you that there's some serious advanced tech when it comes to arms? First things first, swinging. Obviously, if I want to say get directly up to the next hold, you can do it if you press space, which, you know, allows you to move upwards. But it's not that intuitive, and it's a little difficult. However, if we get a nice good swing in, look at that beautiful height that you get. So using your ability to swing in this game is quite actually important, because swinging off holds and shit like that is about 90% of what you'll be doing. Here's an example real quick. Let's grab this hold right here. If we jump and let go, we don't make it up that very far. If we swing from side to side and let go, look at all that extra height we get. Swinging is very important. But another thing that's also very important is how far out your arms extend. This is going to sound like I'm overcomplicating things a lot, and that's because I am. But your center axis of momentum is at the very tip of your hands, and how far out they extend is actually quite important. Alright, so for this experiment, my goal is to drop down onto that rock right there and try to swing off of it. If I do that, but I have my hands relatively close to my body, it's really hard to swing off. It's not that easy, and it's quite unintuitive. However, if I come at it at an angle from which I know my hands are fully extended, and I can use that as a pendulum to kind of swing, then you get so much more height. Basically, think of your hands as kind of the center of your momentum. Make sure you have that in mind when you're going for swings. Of course, another thing that actually is very important to learn is something that we like to do that we call S-jumps. What are S-jumps? First things first, an S-jump is a jump that you do while pressing S, essentially. Basically, you want to go straight up, but you don't have time to swing side to side. You know, that swinging thing that we were doing earlier. Well, if you're stationary and you try to jump up, well, if I just press forward in space, you don't really get a whole lot of momentum. However, if you don't just press W and press S first, and then W after you get up, you go a little bit further. You get a little bit more height. So what am I doing right now? Before I leap off, I'm pressing S and jump at the same time. And as soon as I let go of S and press W. And that is an S jump. If you don't have time to do side-to-side swings, you can kind of do a makeshift swing by doing an S jump. It doesn't give you as much height as probably side-to-side would, but it's still a good technique to learn if you ever need it for any situation where you would need to launch yourself just straight up like that. So that is S jumping. Next on our list is timing. Now, what do you do with your hands when you're in the middle of the air, for instance? When you're trying to reach for the next hold, how should you be using your hands while you're in the air? Well, there is a method that people will call, I don't really know, they'll call it whatever they want, call it hand spam, hand reaching, arm reaching, whatever you want to call it. It's entirely up to you. Doesn't really even matter. But say you're in the air, for instance, and you want to get some extra momentum. Let's do some spinning. If you time your hands to thrust in the air while you're in air, if you notice, you get a little bit of an extra boost. But watch this. If I spam it, it doesn't give you that much of a boost. So you have to time it not super duper duper strictly, but pretty strictly. So here's what you have to do. You have to time it about 0.6 seconds in order to get the best boost per, I guess, launch. The thing about that, though, is while it is technically every 0.6 seconds, for you, I would just say find what feels best for you, but whatever you do, don't immediately go into trying to do it fast, because that won't work. So, doing it slow allows you to get so much more height than you would otherwise. Now, of course, I wasn't able to do all that height without a different tool that we will talk about in a second, but I wouldn't have been able to get as much height as I did if it weren't for good hand spam timing. Now, as well as when you're extending your hands, another thing to note is for hand extensions, when you leap off a hold, you need to be doing that right away. The second you leave the hold is when that timer starts. That 0.6 second timer or whatever, you know, that we were talking about starts as soon as you leave the hold. So you want to extend your hands and then start your timer the second you leave your hold. Because if you don't get that initial major boost that you would normally get if you swing immediately after launching yourself. So always make sure that you're extending your hands as soon as you launch yourself. Now that we have talked about how our arms function, let's talk about the second and most important tool in your arsenal. The secret to perfect movement tech in this game comes with your crampons. Here we are on Ymir's Shadow. I'm going to be using Ymir's Shadow for a majority of this part of the tutorial. Crampons are so goddamn overpowered, you have absolutely no clue. If you think you know how to use crampons still, no you fucking don't. Crampons are so much more powerful than you could ever realize. So, with everything that we've learned about arms, let's focus on crampons now. With arms, we know that we can make it up to holds pretty alright. It's tough, but if you get momentum, you can make it to pretty much any hold necessary. And you don't need crampons to scale a mountain, as evident. However, if you get curious and so much as decide to press that funny crampon button, I try to get from this hold to the next hold. It works, but it's not as impressive as one might hope. First rule of crampons: you want to be pressing not only the crampon button, but also the spacebar at the same time. What will this do? Well, here's the height that you would get if I were to just say, crampon up to the next hold. Okay, I did it. Took a little bit of effort though. Now let's say we do this with crampon and spacebar. Holy shit, would you look at that? Way past the hold. I even died on the way down. Just one crampon, you can barely make it up to a hold. Crampon and spacebar, woo baby. So good. So goddamn good. And the other thing for crampon and jumping to keep in mind is timing. But this one, it really doesn't really matter about the timing that much. Just make sure you press crampon first, then spacebar or jump. Whatever button you have bind to jump. Make sure you press them roughly around the same time. Just make sure crampon is first. And a funny little unknown fact that I actually didn't know going into this video was for space and crampons, it only works on the first one you do. So if you're on the ground or on a hold, that is when you do the space plus crampon. So like right now, I would do spacebar plus crampon. Or on the ground, I would do spacebar plus crampon. But all the other consecutive crampons, you only have to press crampon button. You don't actually have to press crampon and spacebar. So now that we've talked about crampon and jumping, how many crampons do you get per jump? Well, I will answer that question after you pay close attention to this. Listen very closely to how many crampons I get when I launch myself here. Now, that was poorly timed, but just for demonstration. But if you notice that after 1, 2, 3 crampons, the fourth and everyone preceding it was scraping. And that's because you only really get 3 big crampon leaps before the fourth and preceding ones are just give you such little itty wimpy baby amounts of momentum. You still can technically get momentum from preceding crampon jumps, but you really don't get that much, and it can be useful when doing certain skips, but overall, you really only get 3. Now that we know that we get 3 crampon jumps, what's the timing for that? Well, technically, the best timing for crampons is roughly 1 second between each crampon. But I wouldn't say that's a definitive number, because it varies from skip to skip, from jump to jump. It's not necessarily the same for every single jump, but that mostly just comes with intuition. And intuition comes with just learning and practicing. However, everything really starts coming together when you actually start combining your arm and crampon movement. So while yes, it is difficult to learn 2 different timing things at the same time, but I'd say it's better that way, because if you try to just go in, learn hand movement first, you're going to get up to not many places and you're going to be like, okay, I can't really get that far. But if you use crampons and don't use hands, you're not going to get that far either. If you use both, look at all that distance. It's beautiful. But we'll talk more about combining everything later. First things first, we gotta talk about our next segment, your arsenal. The first bit of your arsenal that I do want to bring to the forefront is your funny little piece of wacky tobacco in your mouth. You have a pipe, and it isn't just cosmetic. Even though you look rad as sick smoking that doobie over there. Oh yeah, you do. The pipe is actually a really helpful little tool. Basically what it does is it gives you a boost of strength. It has absolutely nothing to do with your crampons and everything to do with your arms and arm movement / momentum. All right, Walker's Pillar is a tall little thing. It's pretty tall, but I mean, not for us, because we have the power of coffee. Now, coffee is very, very similar to the pipe in that it doesn't have anything to do with how it affects your crampons, but it has everything to do with your arm momentum. So if I do the very common and just very also powerful technique, which I don't think I even talked about it earlier, but this swinging technique on holds, this is a very powerful technique, and this is what most speedrunners use to gain a lot of their momentum. Now, if I use this spinning technique and launch, I get up pretty damn high, especially when I combine it with crampons and stuff. But say, for instance, I take a pint, do the same swinging thing, I get a lot more height. And trust me when I say it is a lot. It is a lot of height. You get a lot more height. So coffee is actually quite a powerful tool for your arsenal. So we talked about how coffee can help you when you're swinging from side to side a lot. It'll give you a lot more momentum that way. But another thing that you can do with coffee is in a feature that we talked about earlier, which is S-jumps. It does help a lot actually with S jumps, mostly because the stats for coffee include, it gives you a bit extra arm reach, extra force when pulling, and extra force when releasing. So those stats also just help a lot when doing S jumps. But again, it doesn't have any effect on your crampons. So anytime you're doing any movement with your arms or stuff like that, that's when you need to be using coffee. So we've discussed the pipe and we've discussed coffee. What else do you have in your arsenal? Well, if you manage to beat enough mountains and gain access to the northern peaks, which is, just the two, Bulwark and ST, if you get access to those, you also get the pickaxes. Pickaxes are actually a lot more useful than you think. We've talked about hand spam when going up a hold. If you launch yourself and also swing with your hands, you get a lot more momentum. You can technically do that with pickaxes, but it doesn't give you nearly as much momentum as hands do. That's another thing I want you to take away from this. If in any situation where you can use the hands over pickaxes, do so. Because hands give you a lot more momentum, except for one little individual case at the very start. If you launch yourself standing on a surface, so not on a hold, if you're standing on a surface and launch yourself with pickaxes, swing your pickaxes after you launch yourself, you will get a bit more momentum than if you do with hands. I can demonstrate that. So say for instance right here. I launch myself with one jump plus crampon, and I get to about here. Do another one for tests. I get to about there. If I do it with pickaxes, look how much further I get. I even went so far on the way back down, I died. You get a lot further on the very first swing with pickaxes. But every preceding swing, you will not gain more momentum. So as soon as you launch with your pickaxes, take those hands out and keep going. Because you will not gain as much momentum if you keep it up with your pickaxes. Alright, I've come to the Great Bulwark actually for this next part, because while we did talk about how pickaxes help you when giving you that extra boost at the start, I didn't talk about how to approach climbing ice. And climbing ice, especially on Bulwark and Solemn Tempest, is very important because it's a major part of those mountains. So how should you be approaching ice? Well, it's honestly relatively similar to hands in the form that the 2 points of your pickaxes are like your main axis point for swinging. And if you want to do a funny swing or whatever with your pickaxes to get some height or whatever you want to do, it is actually important to make sure that whatever you're picking with your pickaxes, that they're in relatively the same spot. Because the further away your pickaxes are from each other, the less just swing, momentum, and all around speed you'll get. So the closer your pickaxes are, the better jumps you'll get. So that is something to keep in mind. And this is actually when the keybinds thing I was talking about earlier comes in. It might be smart for you to keybind both of your pickaxes to the same button. So it's easy to get them out and put them away in a pinch. And something you'll notice a lot when you start getting good with pickaxes is how often you do S-jumps with them. S-jumps are actually really common and powerful tool for pickaxes. So that's another thing that you'll also be doing a lot when you start learning pickaxes, is learning how to S-jump with them. And it's pretty much the same as doing it with hands, except, you're just doing it with pickaxes. Another thing that you'll find is a common occurrence on ice maps is ice walls. So how should you be approaching and climbing ice walls? Well, like I just mentioned, you should be doing it with S-jumps. Make sure you're always doing crampon and jump after every pick, and S jump your way up to the top of the ice wall. And you'll be up the ice wall in no time. It's just that easy. Of course, as well on your journey, you will probably encounter little tiny ice patches like this. This is one of those things where you can come at it from a side angle, kind of like holds, and get a swing off of it that way. It can work pretty well. And like big giant icicles like this are exactly like the ice wall, you know, S jumps, S jumps, S jumps, S jumps. So that is roughly how you should be approaching ice and tackling ice on maps like Bulwark and ST, and I guess whatever new maps that also include ice are included in the DLC. Now for the final part, of course, we have to combine everything together into a polyrhythm. Now, I know what you mean. Yes, what the fuck is a polyrhythm? It's why this segment is called the fuck is a polyrhythm. I'm ahead of you. I already see into your brain. What the fuck does it mean by a polyrhythm? Well, a polyrhythm is, you know, multiple rhythms happening simultaneously. And if you paid attention to the earlier segments, there is different timings for your hand spam and your crampon timing. We talked about a 0.6 seconds for your hands and about a 1 second for your crampons. So what does that look like putting it all together? Well, it's a polyrhythm. And yes, that is primarily how you will get most of your momentum, but obviously that is a little bit hard to just learn. So if you want to go into this and you're scared of doing a polyrhythm, don't do the polyrhythm. Start with, you know, smaller timings at first. Because actually, here's how I started speedrunning the game, and it worked pretty good at first. Just do roughly 2 arm thrusts per crampon, and you will be getting a relatively similar amount of momentum. And after you start learning more to do that, still relatively in one rhythm, then you can start separating the rhythms in order to better fit the momentum you may need for certain skips or routes. So, yes, combining hand and crampon timing is a polyrhythm. But like I said, it doesn't have to be. And also, like I mentioned previously, not every single skip will require the same hand and crampon timing. Some skips might need different ones. And another thing, obviously, in combining everything is combining your coffee and pickaxes into what you do as well. If you're ever standing on a surface, get the pickaxes out and use that first pickaxe swing to get a little bit more boost. If you know you're going to be on a hold, for instance, swinging off of a hold, and you're on the ground for starters, drink a pint first. Go up to the hold and use the boost you get from the coffee to swing upwards. It's all about combining the little things like that. And in doing so, you will get a lot of boosts. One thing, of course, I should mention as well is making sure you're always trying to utilize all the crampons you get in every jump. This is called chain jumping. Being able to use all 3 or more of your crampons in a leap to get to where you need to go. That's chain jumping. Being able to utilize all of your crampons as well. So you want to make sure that you're carrying as much momentum through each hold as possible. So say I'm standing on here. I'm standing on a flat surface, so we'll get the pickaxes out. And then we're going to go to here, swing off of a hold, because swinging off a hold gives you more momentum. Then we're going to go up here, swing off another hold to carry our momentum, and chain jump all the way up to an out of bounds area where I would continue up the mountain. That is what I mean when I mean carrying your momentum. No matter what you're doing, you shouldn't be still when doing stuff like this. You want to be always moving. And if you are at a standstill like this, well, get moving. You know, we want to always make sure that you're going as fast as you can. Don't spend too long on holds, especially if those holds, for instance, are crimps or crumbling holds. Anything like these holds, which drain your stamina, or the slidey rocks, which, you know, the longer you stay on them, the longer you slide. These holds aren't a bothersome at all if you use them to swing, and if you're fast on them. And look how much momentum you can still get from them. And of course, like I've mentioned in the past, you just mostly want to be taking your own approach to different paths and holds. Just find your own way to approach going about these holds. If you find a good spot to do a spinny momentum spot on, go for it. Just go for it. Don't be afraid of being able to experiment with how you carry your momentum. Everyone plays this game differently. There isn't just one set, specifically timed way to be able to speedrun this game. You can do it in any which way you want. And whichever way works best for you is, well, what works best for you. And mostly all it just comes with practice. So make sure you're practicing all your jumps. Make sure you're practicing your chain jumping. Make sure you're practicing carrying momentum, practicing your crampon timing, your hand timing. Make sure you're practicing all that, and you should be able to find your own way. As long as you're using the techniques that I have described in this video, practice and find your own way, you will be a peaks of your speedrunner in no time. Now, speaking of practice, what is the best way to practice this game? Because right now I am on Solemn Tempest and, you know, it's not really beginner friendly. Well, there's some maps of which to practice a few different things. In fact, one of the maps we were on earlier, the Lighthouse, is actually one of the best ways to learn chain jumping. Which is, you know, being able to combine all three of your crampons with your hand spam timing. The reason why the Lighthouse is one of the best places to practice your chain jumping and carrying momentum is if you swing off the hold and use your crampon timing, you can make it all the way to the very top of the Lighthouse if you can get good at your chain jumping. So, the Lighthouse is one of the best ways to practice your initial form of carrying momentum into chain jumping. So this is one of the better places to start. Ymir Shadow is also a really good place because in the speedrun, if you take a pint of coffee, you can go all the way up to this hold if you have good timing. And also, Ymir's Shadow is full of places to do the funny circle thing for carrying momentum, which is also very important. But yeah, that is primarily what I wanted to show on Ymir's Shadow. Ymir's Shadow is just generally a really good place to practice having to chain jump and carry momentum. And it's a good place as well to teach you about skips and routing. Routing is your primary method of being able to beat these mountains in general. Each mountain has a designated route that Andos created for players who do just want to, you know, one hold at a time type shit. But speedrunners, we make our own routes. For instance, if you practiced your crampons, you realized, well, I could take this path all the way up to here, but what if instead I cramponed up to here? That skips that whole segment of going all the way up and around here. What more can I skip? And that is when the floodgates open. There's so much stuff that you can skip after you've learned the momentum and movement of this game. There's so much you can skip. And so, one of the things that I actually will highly encourage doing is taking a look at all the maps again and finding different routes. You will be surprised with what you can find, honestly. I do encourage exploring all of the maps individually and just being able to find different routes that might suit you. And the other thing you could do is watch other players' runs. You know, watch a world record run, see what their route is, and try to practice and replicate it. That is actually a very common and smart thing to do. But not every skip is made easy. For instance, there's a reason why I've come to St. Helga for this. There is a crux here. This is the nose, as many people know it, and you have to do all this underhand gaming. It sucks. Oh, it's awful. But one of the things the speedrunners found is you could just go over it by skipping, going over here and over. And if you carry your momentum, you can come all the way over here and take it another step further by coming up all the way over here, completely skipping the nose, which is arguably the hardest part of St. Helga. And we've just skipped it. So now, all the hard parts of the mountain that you would have to do normally have been skipped. And that can be taken so much further. Like, say for instance, the most foreboding mountain of them all, Solemn Tempest. There are dozens of skips on Solemn Tempest that not only skip a whole lot of the mountain, but are easier than doing it the normal way. And how have we found them? By taking the movement methods that I have explained in this video and just exploring the mountain. So that's why I want to be able to encourage exploration. And with the DLC right around the corner, what better time to have some new peaks to be able to explore new routes for? And of course, you can't really just pop out a route and immediately get good at it. You need to be able to practice your routes as well. And of course, that's where the routing flag comes in. We have this funny little tool that allows us to put a funny little checkpoint anywhere on the mountain that at any point we can be like, oh shit, yeah, I'm fucking up this skip. Let me just press my keybind, come back to this, and completely retry it. That's what the point of the routing flag is. It's in the name. It's in the name. It's routing flag. So there we go. Okay, I kind of messed up that skip, I wish I could do that better. Okay, let's do it better. Routing flag. It's quite helpful. I recommend using the routing flag. And for reference, you do need to beat the mountain first to unlock the routing flag, but also you need to unlock every single collectible on a mountain in order to get the routing flag. And I will link a video to every collectible in Peaks of Yore in the description of this video as well. So you have no excuse to not be using the routing flag. It is a very good tool. Highly recommend using it. Use the routing flag. Now, what happens if, say, you do make it to the top? And, oh my god, you made it to the top, and you got a really, really damn good time, actually. And you're thinking, maybe I could be a speedrunner. First of all, the answer is yes. I don't give a shit what your first fast or speedrun time is, whether it's not even close to any speedrun times or it's world record. I don't care. Your run is still valid on the speedrun.com leaderboards. And yes, it is a speedrun. So if you got a run that you want to submit, how should you submit a run to the speedrun.com leaderboards? Well, that's a great question. So you want to submit a speedrun. Well, the very first thing that you 100% must do before you even pick a peak to speedrun is in the main menu, in the bottom right corner of the screen, you will see the game version. Click it. If it says version visible, then you're in the all clear. The game version needs to be visible at all times in order for a speedrun to be submitted. And by clicking version visible in the main menu, if you go into the game, now the game version will always be visible in the bottom right corner of your screen. So now you're ready to do a run. What now? Well, you need something to be able to track your times in a run. Luckily, the game has you covered. There is a built-in timer that's called the stopwatch, and you unlock it after you beat 2 boulders, which is 2 intermediate peaks. Any 2 of these is fine. You just need to beat 2 of them, and then you get access to the stopwatch. And the stopwatch is actually really good and definitely trumps using live split. So don't even worry about having to set up live split. You don't even have to worry about that. Game's got you covered. Just make sure you beat 2 boulders first, and then make sure you have it bound to something. Mine is bound to 4, and make sure you turn it on before you actually do a run. Now, for the actual leaderboards, there's going to be different rules for different categories, all things considered, but just for the main peaks alone, the rules are relatively simple. Make sure you have your file version in the bottom right. Make sure you have the timer, and that's it. Don't cheat, I guess. But also, there are a couple mods that you can install that are allowed in speedruns. The first mod that is allowed in speedruns is actually called the No Knockouts mod. Now, the No Knockouts mod is a mod that, as it sounds, prevents you from being knocked out. This mod is allowed in speedruns as long as in the speedrun you don't get knocked out. The only rule is that if a knockout is prevented by the mod in a run when it should have happened, in like a big map, say for the advanced or the expert books per se, then the run will be invalid. So if in the middle of your run, you're doing a run and you're like, I fell or whatever by accident, you get knocked out, but you say, screw it, I'm going to continue going, and you have the no knockout mod on, then the run will be invalid. So that is the no knockouts mod. The other mod that you're allowed is the Peak Sweeper mod. The Peak Sweeper mod is really helpful, actually. It is a little mod that gets rid of shrubs and big snow things, I guess, on the Bulwark and the ST. The reason why I'm on Eldenhorn here is because there's crumble holds on Eldenhorn, and there was some confusion, mainly with me even as well, believing that the Peak Sweeper mod got rid of these crumble holds as well. It doesn't. It only gets rid of shrubs and snowballs. And that's it. But other than that, it is a very useful mod, and I would say it is worth using in your runs. Now, these mods are relatively easy to download, actually. You just need a mod loader for the game, and I'm pretty sure the only one that works for both of these mods is Melon Loader, which you can find in the Discord. I will obviously link it in the description. Now, let's say you just got a damn good time that you're super proud of, and you recorded it, you had the game version in the bottom right corner, you had the timer, you didn't cheat, and you want to submit it to speedrun.com. How should you do that? Well, first things first, we need to discuss which category you did the speedrun for. If it's just a base level category for any of the base levels, then you can go to the leaderboard and then just press submit run. As long as you made sure to follow the rules for the category, make sure you read the rules before you submit a run. Other than that, that's pretty much it. You just need to submit a run and that'll be it. However, we have other categories. For instance, in every base level category, we have the regular pocket watch percent and also pipe only percent. This is, as it sounds, you're only allowed to use the pipe. You're not allowed to use crampons or coffee or ropes, any of that stuff. You're only allowed to use the pipes and your arms and your grit. And that's what pipe only is. So if you want to do speedruns, but you're like, I don't want to bother with the crampons, then pipe only is for you. But that's not the only category we have. We have full game categories as well. We have any percent, which in common any percent categories is just beat the game as fast as possible. So get an end credit scene as fast as possible. We also have book percent, which if you didn't know in the game, there is 4 books. Probably going to be more books when the DLC gets added, but 4 books as of now, and each one has a certain amount of peaks in them. Say the intermediate percent, for example, is all the boulders. The expert percent consists of the Great Bulwark and Solemn Tempest, those type of things. So if you just want to run a specific book, that's what the book percent category is. We also have all peaks percent, which is just beating every single peak as fast as possible. In the current category, you just have to beat all 37 peaks in the game. Currently only 0 is the only person to have submitted a run, but yeah. And then at last we have 100%, which is the longest category we currently have. 100% is like all peaks, but also, you have to collect every single collectible and get every single item in the game as well. So if you're curious about doing 100% runs, I also have a link for every item location in Peaks of Yore in the description as well. But yeah, other than that, that is all the categories. You know, just make sure you press this funny button here to show the category and game rules for all of the categories before you submit a run. But of course, if you want to submit a run, just press submit run. The first thing is for, is this a full game run or is this a specific speed run for a specific map? And then you can get into the categories, which category you want to actually do. This here, you will put in your time. Of course, the game doesn't count in full 100ths of milliseconds. So say, for instance, you got a Solemn Tempest time of 15 minutes, 15 seconds, and on the stopwatch it said 0.61 milliseconds. That is 610 milliseconds. So you would put 15 minutes, 15 seconds, and 610 milliseconds. It will actually ask you what you mean by that, and make sure you always go to the 100ths one, because the timer in Peaks can't count to 100ths of a millisecond. Obviously, as well, you need to have a video link, so make sure that you upload your run to, say, youtube.com or whatever. Make sure it's unlisted so that we can see it, and link it here, and then submit. And there you go. You've submitted a run to speedrun.com, and one of the many verifiers will verify and look over it, and then your name will be featured on the leaderboard. And the last thing I want to mention is actually for the other categories, the full game categories, any of these 4 categories. Obviously, the in-game timer only counts for specific peaks, so we actually do use live split for these categories. And we have a couple resources on how to set up live splits for some of those categories, like any percent splits, fundamentals, intermediate splits, things like that. But it's also up to you if you want to make your own live split for these categories. Just make sure that they abide by the category rules. But yes, you do need live split for these categories. But other than that, that is primarily it, really. There isn't a whole lot else that I want to show you. The only thing that I just want to emphasize is practice. Make sure you practice. Practice your crampons. Practice your arms. Practice your momentum swinging. Swinging off of holds. Practice combining your crampons and arms. Practice using coffee in moments that you think would be quite usable. Practice your routes. Practice everything. Make sure you're always practicing, and that is how you will get good at this game. Otherwise, I really hope this video does encourage you to get into speedrunning. Please, please speedrun this game. It's so fun. Please. It's a lot to learn, but hopefully you can keep coming back to this video if you ever need help. Also, if you need help with anything else, make sure you join the community Discord, which I have left in the description of this video, because everyone there is more than happy to help you if you have any extra questions. All right. Yeah. So I think that's it. Thank you for watching. Well, you've come to the end of the video. I really hope this guide helps you out in learning the game better and convinces you to start practicing to be a speedrunner, because you can become a speedrunner. Everyone can. I started this game the same way you all did. It took me around 40 hours to beat Tempest for the first time, but then I practiced and even held ST record at one point. The point I'm trying to make is to not give up because you don't think you could get to that level. I think you'll surprise yourself.